Okay, what up, friendos? Welcome back. We're talking about Corepunk today, which is not something I've done in a good long while. Corepunk, if you don't know, MMORPG, looks sort of like a MOBA or an ARPG. Very stylized graphics, looks fantastic in my opinion, and I've not talked about it for a while. The reason being is obviously world issues and circumstances meant that the game got delayed quite a lot, and I'd not played the game, so I just sort of fell off of covering it. They emailed me a few days ago, full disclosure, and said, we're having an alpha test in a few days. Do you want to test the game and also do a sponsored stream and a sponsored video? And I was like, I'm going to talk about the game anyway, so sure, why not get paid for that? There's literally no contract. We've not signed anything. They just said, you know, we'll pay you later and you can just give you genuine feedback. So here we go. Now, the first thing right off the rip that we need to talk about is this is clearly not a marketing alpha in terms of trying to get as many people in as possible and trying to get as much exposure as possible, which might sound a little bit silly when I also say they sponsored me to make a video, because that is marketing. But I think that's more so to let people know, you know, the game's still there, the game's still coming out. Because like I said, with the world situation that's caused delays on the game, a lot of people legit didn't know that this game was still coming out. So obviously, with that being said, that immediately plays into what exactly you're playing in this alpha. And just for the record, you can't play the alpha. It's invite only, and it's only for the next like day or two. I did give some keys away on my stream last night, but I'm all out, so don't ask me for any. This is an alpha to truly test the game, and some of the questions that kept coming up in the Twitch chat was, how far away is the game? You know, how long do you think it's going to be before they full release? I have no insider info, and it's impossible to tell from playing the game because they limited our playtime to a very small area of the map. And I don't know if that's because it's the only area that's ready, or if it's because they wanted us to not see too much other stuff. Either way would make sense. The first thing that I think is important to address, and that is very clear from the alpha, is exactly who this game is for and who it isn't for. The game seems to be, at least to me, deliberately slow-paced. It seems to be for people who want to enjoy the experience of the journey rather than rush to an end goal immediately. They seem to be designing the game to just be, we're going to introduce you to the world and then let you progress through it without holding your hand or giving you a direct path from point A to point B. The game doesn't rush you, it doesn't push you to do anything, it just introduces you loosely to game mechanics and then lets you decide where to go from there. Now, clearly part of this is due to the new player experience lacking, with another part due to a lack of content. And that's clear because we're in a very limited play area for the alpha. But also the design of the game is, at least for me, a very chill experience, and then you're obviously going to choose when you want the more adrenaline-filled gameplay with the PvP and the difficult dungeons, things like that. So to answer who it's for people who want an MMO that feels more old school in essence, but with updated graphics and design, with simple controls, basic but effective combat, and a world to really pay attention to and explore. And then who it isn't for, at least right now, is for anyone who doesn't like the viewpoint of the game, as I know many people dislike isometric or top-down, people who need a firmer hand guiding them through an experience, and of course people who need high-octane action at all times. If you played Albion and you like the walk around and gather, and that can be a whole playstyle, if you've played old-school MMOs at all, you can probably handle this, because again, the game feels very slow on purpose. This could of course change depending on feedback, what they want to do with it moving forward, but as of right now, before we get into more specifics, I am very pleased with the direction of the game and the foundation of what they've done. There's some clear number issues in terms of a few aspects, but foundationally, it's a fantastic start, and I see absolutely zero reason why they cannot turn this game into an amazing MMO experience. They've literally got everything right there and already working. We just need to see content, how much of it there is, how fun it is, and specifically if they can maintain this level of quality throughout hundreds or thousands of hours of gameplay. And of course, by quality, I mean the graphics look great, being in the world feels great, it seems like the characters have some kind of personality, it seems like they've really tunneled in on this idea of crafting and socialization, but obviously there needs to be way more stuff in the game to experience. That being said, now let's talk about some individual systems and my experience with them, as well as any feedback that I've got. So talking about the features of the game and how it felt, I just have to outline how I look at alphas when I play them. And I've tried to be consistent on this over the years. If a game's in alpha, I'm not looking at, am I having a great time playing this game right now? Is there loads of stuff to do? I'm looking at, do the systems make sense? Is the bones of the game good? You know, is the foundation working well? Are there any glaring problems with the game? And with Corepunk, no, there's no real glaring problems with the game. Everything just seems to work, at least for the small portion of the game that I was allowed to play. So networking seems fine. I was even playing in Bangkok to Amsterdam, and aside from the fact that I could have noticeable lag because, you know, I'm on the other side of the world, everything was fine, even with high ping. There was no frame rate issues at all. The game ran buttery smooth, even while streaming in good quality. There was no bugs that I found whatsoever. Just in general, the game worked flawlessly. There was not a single problem I came across at all with the game. In terms of the graphics, everybody was commenting on the same thing. The stylized graphics, the game world, the characters, the animations and everything look fantastic. They've done a great job on this. Character creators serviceable, which if you remember, they originally was not going to have character creator. You were going to make predetermined heroes. Now you make a character, so it's all your own design from the presets, obviously, like a different hairstyle, hair colors, faces, things like that, skin tone. So that's in there. In terms of the actual minute-to-minute gameplay, so this is where some people are going to have a problem with it, and I don't think it's a problem, but numbers will probably have to be tweaked. So with Corepunk, they very clearly decided that the game's going to be slow-paced, and it's going to have crafting as a core component of the game, not just in progressing your player character power or things like that, but in terms of minute-to-minute playing the game, which I like, because I think crafting is something that is underutilized in MMOs, as opposed to this game, which seems to be using it a lot more than other games. And what I mean by that is, you do not regenerate health or mana while you're playing the game. The only way you regenerate health and mana is by resting at a campfire and eating food, and different foods have different stats. So this one will give you health back, this one will give you mana back, and they don't give you as much back unless you're resting at a campfire. So at the very beginning of the game, you're going to expect to be running around picking up, you know, onions and carrots and wheat seeds and things like that, and then resting after combat at a campfire. And you can later on make your own campfires and be able to take them with you. But if not, you'll be doing it in the town, which immediately gives it like that social vibe of everyone's, you know, chilling around the campfire. And also you are forced into crafting, which again, I do think is good and I do like, although the early game might be a little bit too slow for some people to get into. I personally am a fan of this, and I think that having like a robust crafting system is fantastic for MMOs in general and for the economy of games, because if people are using stuff, it means that stuff's going to have value, and of course that's good for the economy, especially if it's being consumed when done so. The other thing that people will probably have an issue with, and I go either side on this, I can see both arguments, there are no quest markers. And I don't mean like the map doesn't point you to an exact location. I mean there are 0 quest markers, which means you have to talk to NPCs, you have to read your quest text, and then you'll know roughly where something is. And when I say this, I mean that even an NPC that has a quest to give you or to hand in has no indicator. You have to actually interact with the NPCs and talk to them and find out if they have something for you to do. Personally, I'm a fan of like old school game design like that doesn't hold your hand the whole time. But I don't know if they're going to walk some of this back or make it a little bit more user intuitive, because the people that play MMOs nowadays don't do that. People download add-ons to make their life easier, people read guides to make their life easier, and people are going to probably be Googling, where is this quest? Personally, it wasn't a big problem for me, but there was definitely quests where it was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. So that's a thing. Now, people are going to ask about combat, you know, how's the combat? And I'll just say, if you've played any fairly slow-paced MOBA or ARPG, that's basically the combat in this game. It's as good as one of those games, and there's no glaring issues with it. It just works. And this is going to be a game where you have a very limited number of abilities. So it's going to be based on like timing. How did I use my abilities? You know, what level are my abilities and what is my gear? versus I'm just spamming a million buttons over and over again, and it doesn't feel all that impactful. So in terms of combat, I've not done any PvP, but the combat killing enemies that I've done, it just feels fine. I have no complaints and I have no real critiques whatsoever. I don't know how I'd improve this. People have said that the movement seems a little bit slow when you're running around the game world from watching the game, but at the same time, I think they addressed this in the trailers when they said as you get higher level, you'll be able to get items that increase your move speed, basically like boots in League of Legends or whatever, or in Dota. So that completely makes sense. And that brings us to one of the core components of MMOs, right? The core components of any game that uses your character to make you feel powerful and progression. And that is, how does gear work? How do you get stronger? And this is very simple. So in most MMOs, what they do is they have transmog systems, right? Corepunk seems to have figured out a way to both thematically make sense with gear and also to solve the problem of having a transmog system. So in Corepunk, your actual armor, like the gear that you wear, doesn't change your stats as far as I can tell. None of the gear I found in the stores changed any stats at all. They were all purely cosmetic. So you look like what you wear, and you wear whatever you want to wear for the cosmetic. So how you affect your gear is by things that make sense within the story of the game world. So this is like a futuristic style game, right, where there's cyber implants and things like that. So that's how you upgrade your character power. You buy artifacts and you equip them. So like a steroid injector or something like that will increase your damage done, which again makes sense, and also doesn't force them into making a transmog system, because the transmog system is purely just buy whatever you want to wear. Weapons do increase your gear, so I don't know what they're going to do on that, whether you'll just be able to tell whether somebody's wearing like a good weapon or whatever by physically looking at them, which would make sense in a PvP game. And obviously it makes sense from the angle of like, am I wearing a leather jacket? Is that really going to make me more powerful? No. Am I using a big sword that's bigger than this other sword? Is that going to make me more powerful? In the world of anime and video games, absolutely yes. And would a cybernetic that's injecting, ultra steroids into my body make me more powerful than wearing like a shiny new pair of cowboy boots? Yes. So this makes sense. Personally, I didn't get super far into it. I only had like 2 implants. Which did meaningfully affect my character power. I did feel stronger having them on, and I did increase my swag level by wearing an amazing fedora within the game. Tipping my hat to all the miladies out there on Reddit. But other than that, I didn't get super far into the gear system. But this does make sense, and I have no problems with it at all. I think it's going to matter way more later into the game when you're doing the PvP and stuff, like how diverse can the builds be based on this. But that's not based on the gear system that they've chose to use. That's more based on how it's all balanced, right? So obviously when you're looking at an alpha like this, it's really hard to give any kind of like estimation of how good is the game going to be, how amazing is the game going to be. What I will say is that from playing the alpha for a limited number of hours, admittedly, it seems like they've got everything they need to make a good, enjoyable game here. I don't see any problems other than, can there be enough content, and the content, can it be fun enough? Because you can tell the game's hard immediately. Like level 1, you're not running around killing 100 creatures and feeling like a complete badass. You're dying to things, even at level 1, level 2. And 3 or 4 hours later, when you're like level 4, level 5 or whatever, the stuff that you go back and attack is still worth killing, but you kill them way quicker now, and you feel the meaningful progression in the game world and with your game character. So in general, it feels like they're on the right track, and it feels like the game's going in the right direction, but it's all going to matter mostly on what content there is. We've seen from the trailers that they're going to have like group dungeons that look difficult, that have traps, that have boss mechanics, which obviously not a lot of isometric games do super well. It feels like with how slow Corepunk is in terms of like the combat and just general feel of how you're playing the game and how chill it feels, that they should be able to make bosses difficult and still be, manageable and fun without being like a sensory overload of crazy stuff going on. In terms of PvP, that's going to matter on balance, how many classes is there going to be, how viable are all the classes, and what do you get from doing the PvP, and how organic it is to do it, and are people going to be forced into doing PvP, will depend on who's going to enjoy this game. For right now, though, I had no expectations going into Corepunk of it being, a serviceable experience for such an early alpha. And I will say that if the entire game plays like this, with a few number tweaks, maybe the movement speed a little faster, maybe there being a little bit more gatherables in the wilderness to make it feel a little bit more rewarding for being out in the world doing stuff. Just little things like that. Maybe health and mana, regen food being a little bit better earlier on, so you're not spending as much time resting. Aside from those little bits and pieces that you could very easily tweak that are, irrelevant when it comes to talking about an alpha, because that's stuff you do way later on and when people can give feedback on a whole game and not just like a tiny little section. I think that Corepunk's in a real good spot to be a great game going forward. Not just saying that because it's sponsored. Everyone who's watching the stream says the same thing. Aside from it being a little bit slow, it seems like the foundation for the game is there's no problems whatsoever. It seems like everything's going exactly as you'd want it for a game in this stage of development. So they did ask for input on what my critical opinion would be on the game. And again, it's just hard to have one because there was no problems with the game. And again, I'm not sat playing it like, oh, this is an early alpha. Am I having the best time of my life? Is this the greatest game ever made? No, obviously not, because I was mostly just running around testing things, looking around the world, seeing what there is. And I think I'll be able to have way more of a valuable opinion when I see some dungeons, when I see some PvP, when I really, get into a larger portion of the game. But for right now, you should definitely keep Corepunk on your, mental wish list for when this game does eventually come out, which hopefully won't be super long. But of course, the age-old question people are asking, how long do you think it is before the game comes out? And my honest opinion is, I have no fucking idea because I didn't ask them, and playing what we have now is such a small section. I don't know how much they have left in the tank that they didn't show people during this alpha, and I guess when we see that and see a much larger play experience, then that would give us a better indicator. But for right now, I think that's pretty much all I've got to say. Thanks for the money to make a video I was going to make anyway. And hopefully Corepunk does come out within, the foreseeable future. Hopefully it's not super long before it does, because personally this made me more excited for Corepunk, because now I know that the game's not just, an absolute throwaway mess that no one's going to care about. They actually have every single thing that they need for this game to do well. The only question is, how much content are they going to have? How polished is the content going to be? And who's the game going to appeal to the most? Is the PvP going to have enough stuff to do? Are the PvE is going to have enough stuff to do, and how are they going to mingle those two people so that there's a game for everybody? So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, I guess, and see you on the next one. Peace.